What Once Was Mine, Chapter 22, Rapunzel. The next morning, after a surprisingly restful and unhaunted sleep in the burrows, Rapunzel sorted her hair as best she could while Flynn and Gina vigorously discussed possible routes to where the lantern ceremony was held. The epicenter of which was, unfortunately, right in front of the castle on the island, which was obviously bad for Flynn, but just as tricky was getting there. The Stabbingtons were now on the warpath for both him and Gina. Although the harbor could be easily reached in a day, the final itinerary they chose was circuitous, hidden, and would take at least 2. This worried Rapunzel a little. According to her calculations, they'd be pushing it very close to arrive in time to see the lanterns. She pulled out her journal. The lanterns, always appear a month and 8 days before the summer solstice, she said, checking her figures and drawing for 1,000th time. May 12th, yeah, Flynn said. My mom took me once when I was younger, Gina said. It was beautiful. Hundreds of lanterns in the sky, all reflected in the water and everything. We actually had some coins, so my mom let me light one, but she was quiet the whole time. Sad, almost as if she knew the baby princess. Your mother sounds wonderful, Rapunzel said. She's fine, I guess, Gina said with a shrug, but also a little smile, like she was secretly proud. I mean, she's boring. It's all, Gina, get your clothes off the floor. We don't live in a filthy hovel. Just a hovel. Or, Gina, I really need some skullcap. Could you bring me some in the Westerfells? See, that's why I fled the orphanage. Before I was adopted, Flynn said with a sigh of contentment. No one ever told me what to do. No mom doing all mom things, like making me wash behind my ears or make a bed or whatever. Nope, I'm free as a bird. Wait, you're an orphan too? Gina asked in surprise. What orphanage? Mother Mary of the Blessed Little Children. You? Same here. The two adventurers gawed at each other and then began to laugh. Rapunzel watched them with a mixture of amusement and envy. She was the one responsible for bringing these two together and discovering they had a shared past. True, but she wished that she had a past that they could share with someone besides Gothel. Hey, Pascal, she could imagine herself saying. Remember that time when it suddenly rained and I forgot to close the shutters? But also, Flynn had escaped the orphanage as a child. Rapunzel hadn't left the tower until her 19th birthday. Had life been so pleasant that she had never even thought of escaping? Of course there were hours of loneliness and sadness. Days sometimes. Even the cheeriest person in the world would eventually be brought low by what was essentially solitary confinement. But when she'd asked to leave the tower, she asked her mother to go with her. It wasn't really to escape. There hadn't been the thought that she would return to the tower afterward, return to endless hours by herself, painting, cleaning, playing, reading, because she was dangerous and deserved to stay there. No, she realized, nothing really so noble. It was simply because she didn't know anything else, or any other way to live. The tower was literally her entire world. And there were these two strapping, energetic adventurers who had thought the orphanage was their tower, despite all the other people there, and just assumed that better things lay beyond it. Sorry, Gina said, seeing the faraway look on Rapunzel's face. You had to be there. It was a pit. What do other children do who don't escape the orphanage or get adopted? Rapunzel asked quickly, wanting to think of something else. Her two friends shrugged. Get married, I guess, Flynn said. Become nuns. When you're 15, you have to leave one way or the other. You're grown up. They started to make some changes before I left, I remember. The Queen instituted some sort of improvement program. Better food, more classes, fewer lice. Who cares? Glad I got out. I'm an orphan too, Rapunzel said, trying not to sound desperate. My parents died when I was a baby. Mother Gothel adopted me. An orphan who kept as a prisoner in a tower with plague signs to keep away? Jenny gently teased. Seems like a lot of work. Nah, I bet you're a princess of some sort. Rapunzel stared at her. Then she began guffawing, big hearty barks of laughter. She doesn't sound like one, Flynn observed. She wears a pretty dress like one, Gina pointed out. Your skin is creamy and perfect, Flynn said. I guess. You have a crown, Gina said. It's not my crown, Rapunzel shouted, still laughing. I grew up in 2 rooms, not a giant castle. I don't have any servants or ladies in waiting. Or crowns you didn't steal, Flynn added. Or a white horse or velvet capes or a scepter. You do have that magnificent hair, though, Flynn pointed out. I mean, just look at it. It looks fancy and expensive and royal. A normal person, even a lord or a lady, couldn't manage locks half that long, even if it ever came in silver, which seems really unlikely. He leaned forward to get a better look, and at last Rapunzel did nothing, suddenly aware of his closeness. Whatever he said about her skin, Flynn's was also clear, healthy, and peachy. He had a little bit of his hair on his chin, not a full beard like he had seen in pictures. A tiny feathery thing that she kind of wanted to touch. His eyes were bigger up close, which was silly now that she thought about it, because of course they would be. And then she remembered she couldn't be normal. "Don't touch my hair!" she screamed, leaping backward and slapping him crazily. "Whoa, sorry, Your Highness," Flynn said, stepping away. "I didn't realize Milady's silvery tresses were so delicate." "It's not that," Rapunzel said desperately. "Please, I'm sorry. It's just that—" "Yeah, she's got a thing about touching her hair," Gina said. "It's about killing chickens, just FYI. She has some issues." "All right, let's keep going. Note to self, X-nay on the air, hey." Rapunzel wilted and paddled along with them. But Flynn didn't seem the type to hold a grudge or overthink things. Within a few minutes, he was whistling and humorously trying to trick Rapunzel into telling him where she had hidden the crown, and arguing with Gina about their journey. And Rapunzel never stayed blue for long either. Soon enough, she was almost skipping behind them, enjoying her adventure once again. The northern coast is so cold, hard, and, salty," Flynn complained. "Let's just sneak through the royal gardens and come at the harbor from inside the island." "I thought you said you were trying to avoid the city," Gina said. "Yeah, but I like avoiding sea weather too. Absolute nightmare on my skin." "Wow. On that note, I need to find a private tree." "Why didn't you go before the adventure?" Flynn sighed, hands on hips. "You're such an amateur. I'll bet you didn't even pack a lunch." "Go stuff yourself in a wasp nest," Gina said to him amiably, and disappeared into like a shadow into the woods. "She has cheese," he shouted behind her. "Cheese?" Flynn asked, raising an eyebrow at Rapunzel. "Yes, I do," Rapunzel replied eagerly. "And some roasted beans. Hand 'em over. Let's just wander up this way. Give your friend some privacy." Rapunzel was suddenly aware that it was just the 2 of them. Mother had warned her about situations like this. It was one of the reasons she had to live in the tower. A boy would talk sweetly to her, lean in close, try to grab a kiss, and be killed when Rapunzel panicked and fought back, and it would be all her fault. Or was it he would be killed if Rapunzel didn't fight back, if she just kissed him back, and somehow accidentally killed him anyway? It would be all her fault. Or she couldn't remember which scenario her mother had particularly warned her about. Either way, it always ended with the boy's life taken and its being her fault. That was the point of the lectures. And she was now in that very scenario. She was alone with a boy. He caught her staring at him and gave her a sly look. "Super impressed with being with a real, live criminal, huh?" he asked, smiling with the surprisingly nice white teeth. "I'm super impressed with anyone who can fight and knows those woods in the world so well. I guess Gina does too." "Yes, Gina," he frowned. "She's kind of a weirdo. Nice weirdo, mind you, but she's very, very odd." A flurry of thoughts winged her way through Rapunzel's head, like a confused flock of birds on a late summer test flight. She couldn't separate the different feathered things out. She was also puzzled by the look on Flynn's face. He raised his eyebrows and sort of gazed at her, turning his head so that it was a little sideways. He smiled so that his lips stretched wide at the corners, but remained partially closed over his teeth. Obviously, it was some sort of expression Gothel didn't make, but that other people commonly used. So she tried to copy him. "What are you doing?" Flynn asked. "Oh, no," Rapunzel responded, keeping her lips in the same half position. "What are you doing?" "Okay, you're kind of a weirdo, too. No wonder you two get along so well," Flynn said, shaking his head and dropping the look. "Usually the smolder works on all the ladies." Oh, you were trying to. Rapunzel began to giggle. Books number 27 and number 28 were tales of knights and damsels and adventures, with more than a touch of romance. Flynn looked offended. No, please try again, Rapunzel begged. Oh, the mood's gone, forget it, he said, rolling his eye. But he smiled. A real smile this time. A natural one. What did you do all day in the tower anyway? I'm surprised you're not stark raving mad by now. She sighed. I have a very strict schedule. 6:30 rise, chores until 8, first reading 8 until 8:30. I mean the first reading of the day, not of a book. I only have 37 books. I've read them all hundreds of times. I keep begging Mother for more, but she can only find 1 or 2 a year. Next is art. Then on Mondays and Fridays at 10 is preparation for the night's astronomy. On Tuesdays and Thursdays it's writing and rehearsing puppet shows. On Wednesdays it's... Sorry, it's boring you, isn't it? I can tell. No, I don't know what to say, Flynn said softly. He had been staring at her, but it apparently wasn't with impatience. It was something else she couldn't name. And believe me, I always know what to say. Somehow you grew up, maintained a crazy amount of self-discipline, and managed to stay sane. I don't know how you're so constantly upbeat and cheery considering the hand life dealt you. You must be a truly amazing person. Rapunzel blinked, unprepared for this response, but there was something so artlessly truthful about his remark, and it must have bothered him as well, and he changed the subject before she had a chance to say anything. But then why do you want to see the lantern so badly? I mean, if all things you could do out in the wide world once you left, sail on a boat, date around, climb a mountain, why that? Rapunzel shrugged and sort of danced with her feet as they continued down the path, and she looked for the right words. I don't know. It's the only thing I've ever really, really wanted, to see them up close. I thought if you could do that, I could live happily ever after. Really? That's all you ever wanted in life? Really, but now... She looked around at the woods, the same woods she had seen from above, in her tower. It was different when they were down on the ground, and not just because of the way they looked. Everything was dirtier, smellier, in a good way, realer, utterly different from what she thought, and all-consuming. And there were Gina and Flynn, and the snuggly duckling, and Voss, and birds killed by someone else, roasted on a campfire. Nothing she had ever imagined or wished for, but... Somehow, the lanterns were fading a little in her mind, overshadowed by those other experiences. How strange. And now? Flynn prodded. I don't know, Rapunzel said honestly. I don't want this part to end. If I see the lanterns, then I will have seen the lanterns, and it will be over, and I'll go home. I really didn't think you were going to answer that, Flynn said, shaking his head. You always seem to say exactly what's on your mind or in your heart. It's new to me. As a daring criminal, lying is sort of a par for the course. What do you want most of all? The dream that you had your whole life? Rapunzel asked curiously. Flynn looked surprised, and then trapped, as if the question were a snare. Finally, he grinned, utterly erasing any previous emotion. He waved his hand nonchalantly in the air. I mean, what does any thief wish for? To never have to thief again. Piles and piles of money. But before he had a chance to finish, they rounded a corner and were faced by a trio of men waiting for them, weapons raised.